pantheist, monotheist, and Jesus-centered Christians. Bruce Charlton. It seems to me that the religion of Christianity, as expressed in the major churches, variously, since very early in church history, was formed from people who wanted several different and mutually incompatible things. There were pantheists who believed in one deity which was everything, so it was vital that the deity was itself everything, or else had created everything from nothing. They were focused on the inevitability of change and death, entropy, which they saw in all material things, and therefore recognized the ultimate and ineradicable insufficiency of incarnate mortal life on this earth. They also believed that consciousness was a false separation from the reality of universal deity, hence a curse. These pantheists yearned most for escape from this incarnate, earthly, mortal life and the curse of consciousness, and their hope was to become pure spirit, and exist in a timeless state of impersonal bliss. There is no essential role for Jesus Christ in this tradition. Jesus is either dissolved back into the unity of deity, or else regarded as a teacher, helper, advocate or some other such. A job that is no doubt admirable, but secondary and dispensable. This pantheistic strand got rolled up into orthodox/mainstream Christianity, especially from the pre-existing Neoplatonists and mystery religions. In its purest form this led to the Christian Gnostics, but it is found in all the main Christian churches today, most of all in the monasticism of the Catholic churches, and least of all in Mormonism, but is present in all to some degree. The other main strand of the religion of Christianity was monotheism, which was mainly from the ancient Hebrews, and the Old Testament. This emphasizes a supreme and jealous personal God as the only deity, but its focus was on man's behavior and happiness in this earthly mortal life. The monotheistic concern was with evil rather than with entropy. Its concern was with forming God's people as a group. The monotheistic focus was on morality, on the conduct of life, which was conceptualized as a comprehensive and mandatory law, with many rules, dictating that which is virtuous, prohibiting that which is evil. Morality in this life dictated the afterlife, and the major focus of the afterlife was hell rather than heaven. Hell was the default state of eternal torment, while heaven was both uncertain and vague, and mostly co-opted from the pantheistic tradition. In other words, the monotheistic heaven, insofar as it is thought about at all, is only superficially distinguishable from the depersonalized state of a pure spirit, dwelling in timeless bliss. Thus we get the mental pictures of two individualized ranks of heavenly choirs engaged in perpetual cycles of worship, praise, and celebration of the one God. Since there must be only one God, the role of Jesus in this monotheistic scheme is very confused, and indeed incoherent. In practice therefore, Jesus is seen as a Messiah whose fundamental task is to abolish evil on earth. This means that, for monotheists, the concept of entropy is subsumed within the concept of evil. The monotheistic strand of Christianity is found wherever law, rule, and authority are primary, and in such situations Christian churches become structurally all but indistinguishable from other monotheisms, Jewish or Islamic. The task of Messiah is to transform earth into heaven, to immortalize this mortal lie, and purge it of all evil. Since this has not happened, Jesus' mortal life was seen as a failure, and he must therefore return in a second coming, in a role indistinguishable from that of the one God, to finish the work of Messiah. Traditional, orthodox, mainstream Christian churches are composed of various and oscillating admixtures of pantheism and monotheism, varying between times, places, and persons. Jesus-centered Christians only really exist as individual persons, or small groups, because we, are not church-rooted. This kind of Christianity is, potentially, described pretty fully in the fourth Gospel, John, when this book is regarded as autonomous from, and primary among, all scriptures. The focus is post-mortal and incarnated, on resurrected eternal life in heaven, and Jesus is seen as having made this possible, which is a divine act of creation. Therefore Jesus is fully a God, therefore a God later than, and in addition to, God the primary creator, therefore monotheism is not true. For Jesus-centered Christians, Jesus was absolutely essential for those who desire salvation. Before Jesus there was no salvation, and without Jesus salvation would not have been possible. Jesus-centered Christianity is personal, and interpersonal. Jesus was and is a person. Men are individual persons in mortal life. Jesus and men stay persons after resurrection and in heaven. Love is between persons, not abstract, not unconditional. Consciousness is retained after resurrection. Individual natures and purposes are retained after resurrection. For Jesus-centered Christians, without Jesus, there would not be any resurrected eternal life, heaven would not exist, and it is only by following Jesus that men can make the choice of resurrection into everlasting life in heaven. Note added, in summary, pantheists and monotheists fitted Jesus into pre-existing religious structures, suitable for church-based religions, a process that inevitably had the effect of leaving Jesus structurally inessential, if not redundant, despite whatever protestations. Of course, I presume that many Christians have been ignorant of, ignored, or pushed hard against the official theology and doctrines, and lived what was de facto a Jesus-centered Christianity, which needed no church, and need not be known to anyone else, if, instead of insisting upon pantheism or monotheism, we start with Jesus and what he said and did, according to the most authoritative source, we get a Christianity with a very different structure and emphasis. When theorizing about Jesus, we should start from Jesus. Bruce Charlton. The basic problem afflicting the traditional ways of theorizing about Jesus, is that they were doing theology or philosophy without Jesus, then trying to insert Jesus into the scheme. Therefore, insofar as they have been successful at providing a model of reality without Jesus, for example pantheism or monotheism, then they have created a model that has no need for Jesus. This has been the problem with mainstream Christian theology. It derives from worldviews that existed before Jesus, such as Judaism, or the pagan classical philosophers, a worldview that did not include Jesus, and then has tried to insert Jesus into the model, while asserting, as dogma, that Jesus is necessary to the model. The outcome has either been to assimilate Jesus into the pre-existing model, for example with Trinitarian formulations of the nature of God, which strive to maintain Hebrew monotheism. Or else, as with Neoplatonism and most of the mystery traditions, they render Jesus an optional extra to their already complete schema, merely helpful, rather than essential. What we should instead do in a philosophical or theological sense, is to build our model of understanding from Jesus, around Jesus. Starting with Jesus. For instance, Jesus says he came to save us from death, to offer us eternal life, so we may infer that this was not possible before Jesus or without Jesus. Jesus offered a post-mortal life in heaven, so we may infer that heaven did not exist before Jesus. And so on. Of course, we need to insert Jesus into pre-existing reality and reality after Jesus, but this contextualization ought to be done narratively, not philosophically. The story of Jesus is a linear story about, among many other things, creation of this world by God, the nature of men and our place in creation, and man's possibilities in the future. Creation, obviously, came before the incarnation of Jesus and continued after Jesus' ascension. and it seems most people, at the time of his life, and after, never recognized or accepted Jesus' gift of eternal incarnated life in heaven. And everyday life in this mortal world as a whole, for example the balance of present human suffering and gratification etc., seems not to have been positively and qualitatively made better by the life and work of Jesus. From which I infer that the story of Jesus is one that, as he seems to have said, is one that ends and aims at our situation after mortal death. The above are examples. The general point I am making is that we should start our attempts to understand what Jesus did, with the life and death and resurrection of Jesus himself, and our explanations of how this fits with everything else should take the form of a narrative, the history of creation. When doing theology, I think like a scientist. Bruce Charlton. I have noticed a big difference in the way I think about theology, compared with almost everyone else. Which is, that I think like a scientist, whereas they think like theologians. I state this as a matter of observation, rather than trying to assert the superiority of the way that I think. After all, very few people are, or ever have been a scientist. Indeed, extremely few scientists, i.e. professional researchers and scholars in self-styled science subjects, are or ever have been scientists. Modern professional and accredited scientists do not, with very rare exceptions, think like scientists. For instance, they do not seek and speak the truth, but instead they think like the careerist bureaucrats that they ultimately are. Anyway, what I mean is that theologians clearly feel the weight of authority and tradition so heavily that they believe that it would be a ridiculous presumption if they, as an individual person, was to critique, confront, or overturn that inertial mass on the basis of the thoughts of little old me. I don't feel that way. As a scientist, especially the kind of theoretical scientist that I was, it is perfectly normal, indeed it is expected and necessary, that I am prepared to critique, confront, or overturn decades, hundreds or thousands of years of authority and tradition. That is now just allowable, it the job of a real scientist, if possible. That is what the very best scientists of history, the ones we are taught to admire and emulate, have always done. Furthermore, the way that science works is by making different, and perhaps new, assumptions, or hypotheses and then trying them out. Unless we do this, then we will not make any qualitative difference to science. Unless we do this, we will just be extrapolating or interpolating on already existing science, potentially worthwhile, but an activity that comes almost automatically for competent technicians of science. In other words, to do significant science entails being able creatively, and creativity is always and necessarily personal, to select from and reframe existing evidence in the making of new theories. Then, taking that new theory and exploring reality on that basis, to see if it holds up, to see if it has any advantages. This is pretty much what I do with theology. I approach it in a manner analogous to that of the kind of creative scientist that I aspired to be. I seek truth in a scientist's kind of way, but that truth is much bigger than the truths of science. Theological truth is, indeed, as big a truth as I can imagine and express. The desire for significance in our lives, versus the desire for pleasure. Bruce Charlton. We want significance in our lives, but we fear it too. Significance implies that what we think, say and do has permanence and universality, but that clashes with a sinful desire that we can act without consequences, avoid responsibility. A desire for significance also gets mixed up with the desire for esteem, status, prestige, which lead to various types of pleasurable feeling. Yet, in wanting significance in our lives, we are wanting an objective, solid, reality, not merely our personal feelings. In essence, in wanting objective, solid significance, I think we want that, potentially, other people may always be able to know that which is important in what we think or do. We want other people to be able to find out and know what good we did. Find this out for themselves, without relying us on persuading them, or manipulating them in any way. The modern brainwashing processes of celebrity status performed by the mass and social media and their false, dishonest, artificial virtuality does not suffice. It does not do the job we want doing. But why should we want significance, rather than merely wanting pleasure for ourselves, here and now? Ultimately, the reason is, because of love. If we love, we want a shared world, that is an objective reality. Heaven is the situation in which there is significance, permanence, universality, and heaven is a place of love, and only of those who love. Those who do not love, who do not want significance, reality, objectivity, permanence, these are the people who want more than anything current and perpetual pleasure, and they want it regardless of what happened in the past. These people dwell in the state of hell. Because hell is a wholly subjective world, a world where my subjectivity, because my pleasure, is primary. By contrast, a world of relationships, like heaven, must be objective, and to want objectivity is to want significance. Note, this is edited from a blog post of 28th of August 2019. Preparing for death. William Wildblood. Having recently reached my 70 years and 10, I've been thinking about how to prepare for death. Not because I think I'm due to go anytime soon, but as you grow older you start to understand that the way you die is the whole point of life. By that I mean the state of your mind, which is all you'll take with you. So it makes sense to be prepared. Actually, I've been preparing for death ever since I took the fact of the spiritual world seriously, because when you awaken to the reality of God you understand that everything else must be seen in His light. You cannot add the spiritual onto the everyday or worldly, though many people do. The everyday has its place, of course, it is equally wrong to dismiss it as nothing. But that place stands in relation to the spiritual, which is primary. And therefore, since the spiritual will only fully come into view after death, you must start taking death seriously. Not in a way that makes earthly life futile, for earthly life must be lived and lived properly. At the same time, death is the goal of life, the goal, not just the end of it, and you must see it as, in a sense, the crowning achievement of your life. That the great majority of people in the contemporary West do not see it like that may be one reason for the widespread dementia that afflicts much of the elderly population. The obvious reason for that is that people are just living longer, kept going by modern medicine. However, there could be an underlying spiritual purpose behind this too, or accompanying it. I don't know if dementia affects atheists more than believers, but it would be interesting to find out if that were the case, though how many self-designated believers do not really believe would skew the results. Still, it could be that dementia strips away the resistance to the spiritual and leaves its victims on some level more open to the next world. An atheist has by definition erected barriers in his mind. Old age in general and dementia in particular might help to dismantle these barriers, but this is only a passing thought prompted by personal acquaintance with a case in point. To live every day as though it were your last is a traditional spiritual exercise, but nobody can really do that, not for long anyway. The lesson is there, however, and it is to live in the moment or from moment to moment, giving full attention to everything you do and with a proper respect for the awfulness of death. This will also imbue your mind with a sense of your own insignificance and utter helplessness in the face of the universe, but, when backed up with faith in the living God, gratitude and trust, you realize yourself to be totally dependent on God, but His love supports and sustains you always. Preparing for death requires a twofold approach, akin to the division of the virtues into cardinal and theological. Traditionally, the former, corresponding perhaps to natural religion, are justice, prudence, fortitude, and temperance. This would involve developing an inner calm and detachment that brings emotional firmness and stability. Then the mind must be mastered so that thoughts do not run through your head like wild horses but are harnessed and ridden to where you want them to go. Balance, self-control and order are the foundations on which to build the next stage, which is not to say you must wait until these are perfect to begin the next stage, only that it is a step beyond and will work best when it does have this foundation. The next stage is faith, hope and charity, which are the spiritual virtues of true supernatural religion. Mental and emotional control are important and will certainly bring power and insight to the mind. But they won't bring genuine spiritual awareness without the positive qualities of faith, hope and charity. They can make a philosopher or a sage but not a saint, which is why Dante needed Beatrice to take him where Virgil could not go. Preparing for death is all about faith and hope, but these need to be vivified by love of God, for without that they are rather like a car without petrol. They may make the car but they don't make it go. Your mind is all you take with you when you leave this world, but you do take that with you. It may be that you can train and develop your mind when you are in the next world. I'm sure that is the case. Nevertheless, tradition affirms, and it makes sense given the educational nature of this world, that the condition of your mind is all important when you die and that it will determine much about your ongoing experience. Therefore, preparing your mind for death is the most important thing you can do in this life, and that means, on the one hand, mastering it, being controller rather than controlled, and on the other, letting it be irradiated by the love of God. This is the single most important thing anyone can ever do, both in life and in death. What were Christians before the creeds? Francis Berger. Why, Christians, of course, meaning individuals committed to following Jesus to resurrected life in heaven. I mention this because the Apostles' Creed did not, apparently, become a mainstay of Christianity until sometime in the 2nd century AD. The Nicene Creed appeared much later, in the 4th century. So, for centuries Christians were more or less creedless. The Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, and, to some extent, the Chalcedonian Creed fortified the foundations of what would become official church-based Christianity. What makes them particularly interesting is that they were all written to act as firewalls and lines of demarcation against various heresies, including Marcionism, Arianism, Apollinarism, and Nestorianism. These days, some church-based Christians continue to regard such creeds as non-negotiables when it comes to defining who is Christian and who is not. I suppose the creeds can determine who might be considered a proper church-based Christian, but claiming that they are necessary to believing on and following Jesus to resurrected life and heaven is a direct assault upon the beauty and simplicity of what it truly means to be a Christian, at least as far as I'm concerned, which helps explain why I tend to disregard Christians who continue to wield creeds as heresy detectors. Christians were Christians before creeds, meaning Christians can be Christians without creeds. Note added, creeds can also be used to exclude some church-based Christians, like the Mormons, for example. It's time to think about death. Bruce Charlton. William Wildblood has published an excellent post about a subject that almost nobody, in Western civilization, thinks about, except when compelled, death, and how we ought, yes ought, to prepare for it throughout our mortal lives. And by death, I don't mean dying. Dying, and especially the fear of suffering when dying, is a subject that almost obsesses our society, albeit usually in a covert sort of way. Not that dying is unimportant, of course it is, potentially, important, but that the fear of dying seems to block consideration of the overwhelming importance of what happens afterwards, and forever. The embarrassed evasiveness that greets any attempt to discuss death, would strike our ancestors, or probably most non-Western people, as utterly bizarre. Yet I was exactly like that myself, for most of my life. Western mainstream public discourse is, by no accident, I presume, restricted to a forced choice between either an exaggeratedly childish and sentimental fairy tale depiction of life after death, or else nothing at all. Modern people have, apparently, really convinced themselves that the evidence is overwhelming and incontrovertible that death is utter annihilation, and that to think hard about, or to discuss, what happens afterwards, is either a morbid psychopathology, shallowly idiotic self-deception, or some kind of selfish and dishonest mental manipulation. Yet, at the same time, and in mainstream public discourse, prestige mass media, corporate communications, officialdom etc., we see the strong encouragement of exactly morbid psychopathology, self-deception and blatant emotional manipulation when it comes to encouraging and exploiting people's fear of dying. Fear of what suffering might happen, what it, supposedly, might be like, and how suffering may, supposedly, be avoided. These are recurrent themes in the mass media. Returning to William Wildblood's post. Quote, "The everyday has its place. It is wrong to dismiss it as nothing. But that place stands in relation to the spiritual which is primary. And therefore, since the spiritual will only fully come into view after death, you must start taking death seriously. Not in a way that makes earthly life futile, for earthly life must be lived and lived properly. At the same time, death is the goal of life, the goal not just the end of it, and you must see it as in a sense the crowning achievement of your life. That the great majority of people in the contemporary West do not see it like that may be one reason for the widespread dementia that afflicts much of the elderly population. The obvious reason for that is that people are just living longer, kept going by modern medicine. However, there could be an underlying spiritual purpose behind this too, or accompanying it. It could be that dementia strips away the resistance to the spiritual and leaves its victims on some level more open to the next world. An atheist has by definition erected barriers in his mind. Old age in general and dementia in particular might help to dismantle these barriers." End quote. These are fascinating ideas, and similar thoughts have also occurred to me. I agree with William that advances in medicine and better living conditions, warmer houses, more food, are relevant, but they don't altogether explain the tremendous extension of life among the very severely incapacitated elderly. As a strong generalization, dying is easy, it is staying alive that is difficult. However, many people nowadays live many years longer than they say they want to live, and in an extremely debilitated state. Yet traditionally, until recent decades, doctors and nurses with extensive experience of elderly people usually said that when someone loses the will to live, for example after the death of a spouse, and are ready to die, then they will soon die, and it used to happen despite even strenuous medical interventions. This no longer seems to happen. Of course, it is a matter of specific individual persons, but what often happens is, I think, consistent with what William suggests. In other words, among those, apparently a majority, who have lived by dogmatic materialism, and in utter exclusion of the spirit, and who approach the end of life with the expectation, and even desire for, eternal spirit annihilation. Through the effects of aging and disease, such people may experience a return towards the simple and instinctive worldview akin to that of early childhood, a time of life when the spirit was a matter of spontaneous everyday experience, but in old age an analogous way of thinking is perhaps manifested as impaired cognition, delirium, and psychosis. If this is going on, and surely it will not always be the case in everyone of extreme old age or dementia, such persons are perhaps being given an extra chance, by God, to reconsider their choice of death. Maybe they are offered a further opportunity to re-evaluate their long-standing choice of rejecting even the possibility of God, angels, spirits, life after death, and resurrection. We are always free, and the decision of salvation cannot be compelled. Second, third and further chances to recognize spiritual realities may well be rejected. But when the inner barriers of world materialism have been dissolved by illness, then, what were regarded as idiocies and absurdities may become recognized as real possibilities that could be chosen. If that is indeed what we most want for ourselves. In spiritual work, we need to make conscious effort. But not too hard or narrowly. Bruce Charlton. In spiritual life here and now, it seems to be a bad idea to be too specific about what we want to achieve, because then there is a danger that we will achieve it. To make conscious choices of what is needed is good, so long as we don't suppose that we already know exactly what it is that we need, because, if we did, then we would already have it. The problem is that if we conscientiously follow, and work diligently at, some preset path or program, then we'll manufacture a predetermined result. This happens from various causes: fulfilled assumptions, self-deception, peer pressure, perceived personal advantages. In sum, if we get what we want, then we won't be getting what we need. Yet if we do nothing, we shall get nothing. Apparently, we must go deeper, work from another level, one that is less specific and detailed, even as it is more positively transformative and valid. Sturgeon's law again, or, is romantic Christianity necessarily just another liberal apostasy? Bruce Charlton. If romantic Christianity is an insistence that the individual, rather than any external authority, such as a church or a prescribed interpretation of scripture, and his deepest intuition, rather than for example evidence or reason, ought to be ultimately responsible for his Christian belief, then is this not just another version of the kind of liberal apostasy, just another attempt to create hedonic or socially advantageous wriggle room from the obvious and necessary truths of, insert favored church or tradition? The best answer is not necessarily, but sometimes, yes. It is bound to be. Especially when that individual attempts to impose his own personal intuition on other people in some kind of general, quasi-institutional, of self-advantaging fashion. But even when an individual is going his best, the actual practice of romantic Christianity will sometimes or even mostly be contaminated by the basic nature of this reality we all inhabit, which is undercut by entropy and permeated by evil. After all, so far as I can see, some version of Sturgeon's law seems to apply almost everywhere, in the sense that in any category of phenomena involving people, most of that category is more or less crap. But the proper question is in that word necessarily, the question of whether romantic Christianity must be from its nature merely wriggle room liberalizing apostasy. Because even if romantic Christianity is, by the nature of all mortal earthly things, mostly crap, this is compatible with it being at its best actually good and true. I would first say that romantic Christianity does not have to be, ought not to be a liberal apostasy, and that romantic Christianity can instead be a genuine, positive, really new, and better, way of being a Christian, a more authentic and divinely approved way of following Jesus. Why do so many people live so many years of decrepitude beyond what they say they want? Repenting sins in extreme old age. Bruce Charlton. Continuing on the theme of death and dying, and exploring the idea that the greatly extended lifespan in the West nowadays may have a spiritual purpose. The thing about many of the super old, which is, approximately, anyone significantly older than the biblical 60 years and 10, is that for most who attain it, it is a longer life of decrepitude, of significant, perhaps extreme, mental and/or physical dysfunctionality. The modern extended life experienced by most people, a life that goes much beyond the 70s, is often explicitly unwanted by those who receive it. In the sense that many younger people will state vehemently that they do not desire to live into their 80s or 90s if that life is one of significant dementia, disability, if that life is one requiring massive support or residential care. And yet that is exactly the extended life that many such people get, the kind of life that they always said they did not want, and which they may even continue to say they do not want. But which, nevertheless, despite protestations, they act such as to extend, by seeking and accepting continual and escalating social support and medical treatment, even when at vast and crippling expense. It is physically easy to die, especially if you are prepared to experience suffering at the end, yet these people, and there are a lot of them, do not die. Why? My understanding is that their superficial personality self in the here and now wants to die, but their deeper real self retains an awareness that they are not ready for death, that they have unfinished business in mortal life. So, what is the nature of this unfinished business, that may be keeping extremely old and decrepit people alive, despite surface protestations? I think the unfinished business is usually spiritual, usually an inner thing, and therefore we can only infer, or perhaps, in some instances, intuit, what that unfinished business may be. I shall now do this. In one word, the major need is for repentance, in the broad meaning of the word to imply that people need to reorientate their whole thinking and desiring. As they die, such people need to be pointed in a different direction. More exactly, they need to want to be pointed in a different direction, because, thanks to Jesus, that is enough. They need to let go of their, perhaps, lifelong false and incoherent orientation towards seeking pleasure, avoiding suffering, and attaining material well-being. They need to let go of their besetting sins, which are nowadays is perhaps most commonly rooted in resentment, so this is the example I will describe. Since the early 19th century, but especially since the 1960s, the West has been living in an age of resentment. The basis of most politics is a resentment against some other nationality, religion, class, sex or race, and this resentment is regarded as not just true but good, and forms the core of a system of values. In extreme old age the reasons for politics have long since gone. Nobody cares what you think, and it makes no difference to anyone else. But too often the earlier life resentments remain, may indeed be amplified, brooded upon, and in a moralistic way, with self-satisfaction. Elderly people, even with significant mental pathology, may nurse their social and personal resentments, express them obsessively, and seem to approve their own anger, hatred and spiteful desires, perhaps regarding this as signs of their own vigor, signs that they have not abandoned their principles. To die in such a state has a bad spiritual prognosis. And I think that some of the extreme elderly are kept alive despite the failure of brain and or body, in hope, God's hope, Jesus' hope, that as dependence increases, as life simplifies, as thinking simplifies, perhaps the individual may come to recognize the futility of resentment, the wickedness of resentment. Perhaps he may attain some other spiritually healthy attitude, such as forgiveness, humility, gratitude, a benign disposition towards others. An honest recognition of the pervasive decay and evils of this world, which includes all of us. A focus on the genuinely important things of life, especially love, and the beautiful moments nearly everyone has experienced in reality and or imagination. and perhaps a desire to move on, beyond death, to a world free of decay and evil, and wholly rooted in love. Such is the kind of thing waited for, hoped for, in extending the life of the extremely elderly beyond what they say they want. Such repentance may not happen. But it may. After attaining which, the individual can die as soon as maybe, and with a vastly better prospect for life after death than would otherwise have been the case. Badly phrased proverb number 1, you can't have your cake. Bruce Charlton. You can't have your cake and eat it too, is a very badly phrased proverb, for two reasons. 1. Having cake is intended to mean something like hoarding, retaining, or continuing to possess your cake. Yet having a cake usually means to eat that cake, which meaning obliterates the point of the proverb. Or rather makes it an oxymoron, something like, you can't both eat your cake, and eat it as well. Nonsense. 2. Eat it too is spoiled by the double meaning of two when the word is heard but not read, which was how I first encountered this proverb, as a child. The intended meaning is of course, two meaning as well or at the same time. But the other meaning of the sound two is the number, and this is just confusing. To work properly the proverb would need to be made unambiguous, something like, you can't both eat, and keep a cake. The man died, but his truth lives, and that's better than nothing. Francis Berger. Sylvester Ordo's Kopernaic Hygiae, place of the skull, i.e., Golgotha, turned out pretty much as I expected it would. Instead of resurrection, we get the preservation, that is, an entirely mortal Jesus dying on the cross in an effort to preserve the truth of his teachings, which boils down to love one another in this mortal life because there is nothing on the other side of death. Of course, he doesn't say the latter part out loud but affirms it privately within the narrative. The only thing that is remotely spiritual in the novel surfaces in the oneness feelings Jesus experiences as he stumbles with the cross on his way toward Golgotha. Exhausted and bloodied, Jesus feels an affinity for the dust into which he collapses and is strangely relieved to know that he, too, will soon be at one with the dust. So, Jesus dies and remains dead, but his teachings live on after being accentuated by supernatural flourishes added by later believers. Voila! The planting of the seeds of Christianity. That's it in a nutshell, thematically at least. Thematic considerations aside, the novel did contain some unexplained phenomena, chief among them, Jesus' ability to instantly heal the ear of the soldier Peter wounds in Gethsemane. The miracle is left unexplained. Of course, the miracle is recounted only from Peter's narrative point of view, leaving open the option that he just hallucinated the miracle. Overall, a strange little novel, but well written and worth reading, despite the utter rejection of any assumptions concerning the resurrection. If anything, it made me reflect upon how people who do not believe in the supernatural might square the life and death of Jesus in their minds. Why do I find so few blogs worth reading? Disengagement, and its rationale. Bruce Charlton. In the past few months, I have begun to limit my reading of blogs more and more, including those I have been reading a long time. This was not a strategy, was not intentional, but something that I realize has crept up on me. If I try to explain or justify this, I think the answer has to do with the continuing phenomenon I have often called things coming to a point, which I understand to be something that happens when the world is getting spiritually worse over time. When the world is getting worse, then the spontaneous default is for everything to get worse, which implies that if we personally do not want to share in the corruption, then we must spiritually detach from more, and yet more, of the world. And the process is ongoing, because the world keeps worsening. Insofar as we fail to do this, we will join ourselves to the increasing corruption of the world. And this corruption will reveal itself, both passively, in terms of what we go along with, but also actively in terms of what we explicitly support. I think this latter, for me, is the critical aspect. I mean, what people actively support, and more especially what I infer to be their motives for doing so. We all differ in our specific tolerances, and I personally have a particularly strong aversion for spitefulness and schadenfreude, and these seem to be stronger and stronger motivations behind more and more online writing. It is this, more than anything, that has driven me away from one after another blog, a sense that the ideas, ideology or religion is in fact serving primarily as an excuse for indulging in the expression and advocacy of spite and sadism. Like most sin, once defended and apologized, such a writer gets to enjoy his revenge and retribution fantasies, until they undercut or swamp the good motivated stuff. The ideas, including the expressed Christian beliefs, have become a rationale for negative values. The negative values induce a dominant orientation on enemies and what should or shall happen to them. In my experience, people in the grip of such demonic passions are hopeless and unreachable, and indeed are fed by any form of engagement. They thrive on opposition, and they thrive on constructive and empathic approaches. This may also be seen in the extraordinary and escalating levels of braggadocio and self-aggrandizement among far too many bloggers, which provoke in me a mixture of irritation and embarrassment, much as when observing the antics of a kindergarten kid having a tantrum. So disengagement is the proper strategy, as it is with the demon-dominated, psychopath-mediated, world of public policy and discourse. Disengagement, with lapses, alas, is therefore exactly what I have been spontaneously engaged in, actively trying to do, and, to an increasing degree, actually doing. With Your Face in the Dust. Francis Berger. I would like to share an excerpt from a short Hungarian novel I finished reading a few days ago. Below is my rough translation of the brief chapter called With Your Face in the Dust from Kopaniak Higye, Place of the Skull, by Sylvester Ordo. The chapter recounts Christ's first fall on his way to Calvary as told from Jesus' narrative point of view. Bear in mind that Ordo presents Jesus as a fully mortal man who does not believe in the possibility of resurrected life or heaven. I'll comment in a future post. With Your Face in the Dust. This is where you should have started, down here, at the bottom, in the dust. Not in the temple, not on steps, from the dust. What a perspective, have you noticed? How large and varied the dust specks are. Who would have thought? Do you feel them between your teeth? Scraping, grinding, working in your mouth. Soon you will have no teeth. The dust will erode them. This fine, warm dust will eat your teeth. How would you have known this? How? Would you ever have believed that you could still learn, even now? That these lifeless little creations are capable of opposing you? The specks of dust can make you forget your pain and bitter sorrow. They laugh at the silent effort you exude as you heroically carry your cross. They laugh at your attempts to muffle your groans, to hide your trembling muscles, to conceal that your exhausted legs are rebelling against your determined commands. Can you smell them? Your nose is full of them. Can you see their colors? Your eyes are full of them. Can you taste them? They are nourishment for the saliva foaming in your mouth. Do you see? This is where you should have started, down here, at the bottom, in the dust. Smile, rejoice, if you can. You are victorious. You have ascended to the dust. Up to this sacred everywhere, up from the depths of the temples, from the vulgar labyrinths, from the precipice of injustice. Rejoice? Try? Want it? You have discovered the starting point. You must make this known, you must. The people must know about this to save them from self-deception, to prevent them from deceiving each other. You must make this known. You must go out and preach about it. Specks of dust, my little brothers and sisters, listen to me. I am one of your dust speck brothers. I just want to say that I now know myself. I know myself because I have met you, because I have recognized you and love you. Do you also see yourselves in me? Don't stifle your voice. Don't let the dust specks irritate your eyes. Ignore the mud that has dried on your tongue. Speak. Shout. Let the world know. Specks of dust, my little brothers and sisters, you should know that we are the building blocks of this world. It is out of us that life emerge. It is out of us that truth emerges. Specks of dust, my little brothers and sisters, we are the way. Let us love one another. Let us work together. We will be the grass and the trees. Let us carve the rock together. Keep moving. The tears will rinse the dust from your eyes. Spit the caked dust from your mouth. You have to keep moving. You must stand up. They are tugging at you, lifting you by the arms. Somehow, you are back on your feet. You're standing, drained of every ounce of strength you thought you had. Death and birth, two sides of the same coin. William Wildblood. When we are born into this world, alone and defenseless, most of us are welcomed with love and cared for until we are able to look after ourselves. Our adjustment to the world is facilitated by older, wiser beings until we have developed the ability to negotiate its demands and challenges on our own. It is a truism that the same patterns repeat themselves throughout the universe and at all levels of being. Thus, there is every reason to hope that when we die in this world and are born into the next, we will be welcomed by souls who love us and who will look after us until we are able to make our own way in this new environment. Forget heaven and hell for the moment. That is too simplistic a framework for the immediate post-mortem experience. To be sure, there will be some sort of judgment and some sort of purification further down the line, but for the majority, saving the very saintly and very wicked, before this there will be loving help in adapting to our new world just as there is in this world before we must face the next stages. At least, that will be the case for those souls, whatever their spiritual status, who are open to the experience of the new world and who have not darkened their mind by closing off the possibility of rebirth in the spiritual. In the next world it is your own mind that determines your outer situation. Not your intelligence but your spiritual openness and ability to accept light. By no means everyone can accept light, and the cleverer person sometimes least of all. That is why faith is so important, and why the innocent faith of a child may be a better guarantee of moving on in the spiritual world than all the wit and wisdom, earthly wisdom, of the philosopher. In the previous post I spoke of people being stripped of their worldly pride and arrogance through the processes of old age and, nowadays, dementia. This is to prise open the barriers they have erected in life and reduce their resistance. This is not done for any other reason than to help these souls make a better transition to the next world. Otherwise they might find themselves in a darkness that is an exteriorization of their own mental state, where they will remain until they start to wake up. The best way to approach death is through faith, hope and an inner calm that rests on the confident. Confident means with faith, belief that it is an integral part of life arranged by a loving God. Death is not a light matter, nor can one deny the aspect of pain and suffering that may be involved or leaving people behind. for the time being, whom you love. We cannot escape the fact that death in a fallen world has its dark side. But it is also a release into a higher world and a more expansive state of being, and if we can see it in those terms, then its sting will be blunted and we might even regard it as in some respects a blessing. After all, dying might be bad, but not being able to die would be much worse. The physical world is a world of entropy as it must be, since only spirit endures forever. Rather than taking this material decay as a sign of ultimate nothingness as the atheist does, we should see it as a vindication of belief in the reality of spirit. Viewed in this manner, death is the proof of God, not the denial. The place of the skull equals a kind of positivism. Francis Berger. It strikes me that Sylvester Ordau's depiction of Jesus as a mortal man who sought to transform the world through the principle of loving one another as the only solution to the finality of death in mortal life amounts to little more than thinly veiled positivism. For all of his anti-religionism, Auguste Comte promulgated love as the driving principle behind his positivist philosophy and much desired religion of man. Comte defined love as living for others and regarded it as a duty and moral/ethical imperative that would engender a benevolent society in which everyone prioritizes others over their own self-interest. The man believed in altruism. He coined the term. In connection with the above, Sylvester Ordau portrays Jesus as little more than a positivistic trailblazer. The emphasis on love as a foundational force that can mitigate the suffering of mortal life and help create a better world for oneself and others provides the key. As attractive as Ordau's take on Christ may appear, it is an unmoored representation that extends no further than Comte's ramblings on the significance of love in a purely material universe. Love that cannot transcend the material is, at best, a lower form of love. Better than nothing, I suppose, however, in the case of altruism, a dangerous abstraction and certainly not the do-all and end-all that writers like Ordau and thinkers like Comte promote it as. The problem of reacting to current affairs, the example of the 2020 Birdemic. Bruce Charlton. Much of the public space is taken up by people reacting, especially to news and current affairs, including a wide range of stuff from celebrity gossip to what are presented as serious analysis of the big issues of our day. I have, myself, done a lot of this over the decades. At the trivial end of the spectrum, this kind of reaction material is dealing with obviously, indeed aggressively, trivial distractions from mundane living, as when YouTubers film themselves acting their emotions on unboxing consumer items. Indeed, my YouTube feed shows that so-and-so reacts to such and such is a large and popular genre on this platform, and no doubt others. The trouble is at the other end, would be serious analysis of the big issues and events of the times, because that is where people are trying to reflect and to work out their own basic stance on life and how we ought to lead it. Take, for instance, the 2020 Birdemic and the subsequent multi-million person peck, a subject about which I reacted and wrote a great deal at the time, and since. The trouble is that we don't really know what was going on, even at the most basic level, and never shall. We know, at least, I feel that I know, because it is not a secret, that the 2020 global lockdown event in response was in some general sense planned. But probably that is all we do know, for sure. More exactly, the response was definitely planned, including the peck, which was several or many agents, seemingly, because the peck had already been made, but what the Birdemic event itself was is something about which I don't think anybody is at all sure. I don't doubt there was a plan, something was launched, and that there was some kind of deliberate seeding of the environment with something, some modified agent that was intended to be highly infectious and highly lethal and lead to a real emic. But if so, it seems that the plan did not work as planned, because there was no highly lethal and highly transmissible agent, or, perhaps, only a very little of it, and it is possible that the cases, including deaths, were nearly all, or in some times and places literally all, a combination of other agents and no agent. The observed and reported data can easily be explained in terms of false attributions of causes to symptoms and death, and false positives from signs and tests that were wrongly and dishonestly deployed and interpreted. This nothing Berger understanding of the Birdemic itself, as distinct from the response it is quite possible. But so also are many other scenarios, at more and more superficial levels, where various parts of the official story, some of the official data, are factually correct, even when the implications of these facts are false and manipulative. Maybe there was a real new agent that spread around the world infectiously, but it just didn't have a high mortality. And, if so, exactly then some possible questions, much discussed, include: where did this putative new agent come from? Was it natural or contrived? How and why was it released? How was the media coverage managed? How much reportage was completely fake, did not happen IRL, and was instead enacted? How much did happen but was done deliberately? And, on top, how much was indeed spontaneously happening, as reported, but distorted and amplified and misrepresented by reportage? Then the questions of actual human pathology, sickness and mortality. Aside from how many of the attributions of causality were lies or mistaken, there is the huge question regarding how much suffering and death was caused by the putative agent, i.e. by the Birdemic, and how much by the response to the Birdemic, i.e. lockdowns, distancing, masking, swabbing, gross neglect etc. The response, which we know was pre-planned, was claimed to be working against suffering and death, but the response certainly must have caused some, much, or perhaps most of the suffering and deaths attributed to the Birdemic itself. And if the response caused most of the suffering and death, then was this suffering and death an accidental, deluded or incompetent, byproduct, or was mass suffering and death strategically intended as part of the plan? And if the suffering and death was indeed strategically intended, then did the strategy succeed? Did the actual amount of extra suffering and death match up to what was planned? My point here is to emphasize just some of the uncertainties that surround reacting to current affairs, and the implication that some of the reactions that are intended to be skeptical, and intend, or claim to intend, to oppose the establishment agenda, will instead actually support the establishment agenda. For instance, analysis and skepticism regarding the official story of the origins and mode of spread of the Birdemic, usually accepts, or takes for granted, the reality of the Birdemic, i.e. it implicitly believes the official story that there was indeed a highly lethal and infectious agent whose genetic sequence is known. Or, dissent over the nature and effectiveness of lockdowns or distancing, often accepts the assumption that some kind of general government-imposed societal response to the Birdemic was necessary, despite no evidence from official data of unusually high mortality rates before the lockdown/distancing. Whereas, if there was no significant reality to the Birdemic in the first place, then no response was ever necessary in the first place, which means that a response was actively contraindicated, given that the scale and nature of a social, indeed international, response in terms of major social change, was itself inevitably itself bound to become a significant cause of disease and death. So dissent, opposition, analysis, may quite easily end up supporting and sustaining the very agenda it tries, or appears to try, to oppose. Especially when the nature or reality of the problem is not really known, and perhaps unknowable. In a nutshell, when we react to anything we know of, or think we understand, only or mainly via officialdom and the mass media, we absolutely need to bear in mind that there are a vast range of possible realities, and in reacting to one, we are always assuming another. And the range of possible realities extends from nothing at all having happened, total fakery, through levels such as the event being real but staged or permitted, to the event being factually, more or less, as described, but the interpretation of that event being dishonestly manipulative. All we can ever know for sure is that, as of 2026, the official story is always false, but we can seldom know in what way false, so our reactions may be being manipulated in ways we do not detect, and may therefore do more harm than good. Big events are distorted versus micro/non-events getting inflated, two kinds of media manipulation. Bruce Charlton. In that seminal year of 2020 we saw example of the two extremes of coordinated global media manipulation. At the start of 2020 was the Birdemic, i.e. the international response to the supposed emic, the lockdowns etc., which was not just a big event, but the biggest event in the history of the world. The role of the mass media in this instance was to distort a genuinely vast phenomenon in pursuit of the system agenda. Then in summer of 2020 we saw a micro-event, or non-event, in a town in the USA, blown up to an international scale phenomenon for months, everywhere, apparently obsessing the leadership class down through all their managerial, intellectual and professional myrmidons. From nearly nothing, or actually nothing, the system was able, in an incredibly short time scale, to make a defining global phenomenon, such that socio-political changes were implemented across the entirety of Western-dominated nations. That is the power of the system, of the establishment, of the unified and linked totalitarian social institutions. The power, via mass and social media, and the mass addiction to them, to focus and sustain much of the attention of hundreds of millions. And, reciprocally, the power to get hundreds of millions largely to ignore what they want ignored. When the issue is big, like the Birdemic, Heck, Fire Nation or A.I.apostrophe, I assume that they are then engaged in a major attempt fundamentally to reprogram human thinking in some way that progresses their agenda of atheist materialist bureaucratic self-damnation. When instead, as today, the global media are focused on an issue that is so micro, so trivial, that it may be literally nothing at all, I think we can be sure that they are doing so partly in order to prevent people noticing something very big. But also because such micro/non-event based frenzies are a big part of Project Chaos, the demonically driven evil agenda focused on spreading and amplifying mutual hatred, endemic fear, motivating resentment, and existential despair. Big event mania promotes totalitarian evil, and plans for system omni-surveillance and micro-control, while non-event frenzies strategically promote civilizational and system breakdown. In a nutshell, big events are intended to unify, inflated micro-events are intended to divide. Non-event frenzies have a triple effect. In the short term and long term they actually promote disorder and breakdown, but they are successfully, and dishonestly, sold to the system totalitarians because they can be used to implement increased totalitarianism in the medium term. Forget reaction. Try problem, creation, solution instead. Francis Berger. Dr. Charlton has posted some incisive observations on the topic of reaction, more specifically, on the perils of reacting to narrative peddled via the mass media, politics, and such. Bruce concludes, quote, "In a nutshell, when we react to anything we know of, or think we understand, only or mainly via officialdom and the mass media, we absolutely need to bear in mind that there is a vast range of possible realities, and in reacting to one, we are always assuming another. And the range of possible realities extends from nothing at all having happened, total fakery, through levels such as the event being real but staged or permitted, to the event being factually, more or less, as described, but the interpretation of that event being dishonestly manipulative. All we can ever know for sure is that, as of 2026, the official story is always false, but we can seldom know in what way false, so our reactions may be being manipulated in ways we do not detect, and may therefore do more harm than good. End quote. I am firmly convinced that the issue of reacting to being manipulated by topical news events, media narratives, and political incitements is paramount to Christians, spiritually speaking. To begin with, it is crucial to consider that reaction amounts to little more than obedience to some external stimulus. Yes, obedience because the actions others, in this case, the system and its mass media, utilize are usually little more than commands, incitements, enticements, and provocations. They demand a response, expect a comeback, and yearn for a backlash, all of which a reactive perspective is more than willing to supply in spades. The commanded, incited, enticed, and provoked are not genuine actors but reactors. The script they choose to follow is not their own. They speak lines penned by others and move across the stage following directions that are not theirs. If action is the pressing of a button, then reaction is the pathetic movement of the button returning to its original position after having been pressed. Every reaction to incitement, enticement, and provocation is obedience to a command. It is the admission that I have allowed my thinking, action, and conduct to depend entirely on the thinking, action, and conduct of another. A true Christian cannot allow his actions to be mere reactions, nor can he act in a way that serves only to incite, entice, and provoke others into reaction. To do either lowers him to the level of his enemy, to the mundane, average, predictable, and common ways of thinking, acting, and being. True Christian thoughts and acts are not and cannot be knee-jerk responses or compliant responses to outside forces. True Christian thoughts and actions transcend reaction and all reactive activity. They grow organically from the depths of inner being and turn the incitements, enticements, and provocations on their heads. Creation is not reaction. As such, it never feels like a reaction because it obeys nothing external and rises above the actions of others, far above the reach of even the worst of incitements, enticements, or provocations. The system is calibrated to trigger negative spiritual participation, primarily through lies, deceit, and manipulations that aim to provoke a reaction. Reacting to system manipulations may look and feel like positive spiritual action, but it is not. The actual act remains within the system domain. The reaction is primarily a Pavlovian response. Reaction assures the system of the effectiveness of its conditioning and manipulations. The more we react, the more assured the system becomes. Jesus instructed us to turn the other cheek. Modern man interprets this as pacifism. A terrible error. Turning the other cheek signifies the transcendence and transfiguration of a reactive state. The person striking you on the cheek expects a reaction. He anticipates your striking back. He does not anticipate the turned cheek. His model of reality shifts. He finds himself in an undiscovered country, suddenly uncertain about what may come next. Christians talk a lot about transfiguring themselves and reality, however, they cannot transfigure anything in a reactive state. Why? Because reaction is not genuine action. Reaction is not doing. Reaction is having things done to you. Reaction defies transformation because it keeps you locked in the faux reality of determinism. The only thing the reaction confirms is how impossible it is for you to have made any other decision or performed any other action. The system loves that sort of thing. The urge to do something must motivate Christians to act, genuinely act, rather than merely react. The root of such motivation is in thinking that aligns with creation. David Icke coined the term problem, reaction, solution to describe how the establishment manipulates people through its system and mass media. The establishment promotes an urgent problem through its channels, waits for the pre-programmed/preconditioned reaction, and then happily provides the solution to mollify the reaction. As far as I have been able to discern, the only viable way to avoid reactive behavior and thinking and the whole problem, reaction, solution paradigm is to align thinking with God and creation via love. Thus, instead of reaction, we should focus on creation, which entails creative thinking and being that aligns with God's creative purposes. Problem, reaction, solution. Forget that gerbil wheel. Try this instead. Problem, creation, solution. Note, the bulk of this post comprises excerpts from previous posts on this topic. The perspective of psychotherapy is something new and assumed. A gross and harmful distortion of modern biographical writing. Bruce Charlton. I have read and continue to read a lot of biographies, both formal biographies, and more journalistic accounts of people's character, actions, and lives. And since the mid-20th century, most biographies I have encountered, especially the worst ones, and the worst aspects of even the better biographies, adopt the assumptions of psychotherapy even when writing about older and the pre-modern people. Yet, I am confident that people of the past were not motivated therapeutically in the way that modern people are motivated. That is, I don't believe that past people lived with the implicit, often explicit, intention of reducing their, more or less severe, more or less long-term, psychological state of dysphoria, i.e. feeling bad/adverse/unpleasant in some way. Nor did past people have the overarching life purpose of making themselves feel better, by their life choices and behaviors. We moderns usually do have such a perspective on life, but it was not always thus. Furthermore, the psychotherapy perspective in biography, i.e. in the intent of understanding people, usually traces dysphoria to either past experiences, for example childhood or early life relationships, traumatic events, disappointments etc., or to disease. Whereas it would be more accurate to recognize that much of our character is inherited. Yet, heredity was the first-line explanation for human behavior for, probably, thousands of years, i.e. through most of recorded history. I mean, to explain a person's behavior, the usual thing in earlier times was to discuss what had been inherited from parents and other ancestors, including typical racial characteristics. The consequences of these anachronistic distortions is profound, a gross failure to understand what it is to be human. We moderns populate history with versions of our own unusual modern consciousness. This has many adverse effects, including eliminating from consideration a whole world of group consciousness, of people who lived embedded in a psychological world derived from their ancestors. Eliminating many centuries in which religion was such a powerful motivator that it was often primary, and overcame considerations of personal happiness or suffering. And, because psychology and psychotherapy are products of the atheism and materialism of modernity, past experiences and diseases are typically explained in wholly materialistic terms, and when heredity is considered, it is materialist, only from the modern and narrow perspective of genetics. Thereby eliminating a world in which the spiritual was pervasive, and relationships naturally and spontaneously extended to include the dead, spiritual beings such as angels, demons, fairies and ghosts, and eliminating, also, what used to be profoundly life-shaping experiences of direct relationships with the divine. Thus modern biographical writing is yet another of the many ways in which, by our assumptions, we paint ourselves into a corner of alienation and soullessness, whereby we conceptualize ourselves as nothing more or other than material entities produced by and acted upon by material influences. In a world that has always been like this, with the implication that our condition is inescapable. Atheist materialism versus church religion, only one winner, unless. Bruce Charlton. Atheist materialism, the mainstream ideology of the West, that monopolizes the entirety of public discourse, is a system of reasoning that claims to be wholly based on evidence. It claims to make no metaphysical assumptions regarding the ultimate or basic nature of reality. Atheist materialism therefore operates wholly at the superficial level of evidence and logic, as defined by its denied assumptions of what constitutes valid evidence and logic. This is achieved by taking its own metaphysics for granted, and denying it exists, and keeping all discourse confined within its own assumptions, and declaring everything else to be meaningless, or merely arbitrary personal opinion, which amounts to the same thing. Church religions are deeper than atheistic materialism, because churches declare specifically their own fundamental metaphysical assumptions concerning the nature of reality, and that these assumptions are shared by the religion's adherents. Church religion is superior to atheistic materialism because it knows and admits that it has metaphysical assumptions, which it then sets out explicitly, whereas atheistic materialism falsely denies that it makes any metaphysical assumptions. However, these fundamental religious assumptions differ between religions. Each religion defends its own assumptions by trying to prove them, either prove them from evidence, such as the claimed observable consequences of belief and unbelief in terms of individual psychology, or perhaps societal functioning. Or else religions try to prove their fundamental assumptions using rational logic. Religions try to prove that their assumptions must be as they are, or else things would be incoherent or incomplete. However, to the atheist materialist, the variety of church religion's metaphysical assumptions is regarded as conclusive evidence that their assumptions are arbitrary, just made up. And the atheist materialist regards attempts by religions to prove that their own particular metaphysical assumptions must be true, whether the attempted proof is by observations or by logic, as being dependent on already accepting the religious assumptions. I.e., church proofs are seen merely as circular reasoning. Atheist materialism has alternative and non-religious explanations for all church attempts to prove all possible systems of religious metaphysics. To atheist materialism there is thus zero evidence for anything religious, and the assumptions of all religions are seen as arbitrary and just made up. Atheist materialism nearly always wins disputes with church religions, because atheist materialism is much more powerful. Very nearly all-powerful, at the Western civilizational level. The metaphysical assumptions of atheist materialism are immune to social refutation because they never discussed as being beliefs, and are denied to be assumptions at all. This rhetoric is effective and works because the metaphysics has been built into every type and level of the functioning of modern society, and inculcated such as to become habitual during socialization. Atheist materialism is the default for modern men. Church religion continues to lose this debate with atheist materialism, because the dominant public metaphysics depends on power, and church religion gets weaker and weaker. Also because church religion has assimilated more and ever more of the assumptions of atheistic materialism such that it has conceded all the most fundamental ground in advance of discussion. Therefore, attempts to prove any religious metaphysics in publicly acceptable or socially effective ways in our society as it actually is, merely lead back into atheistic materialism. Church religion is consequently stuck and doomed, because insofar as a religion has power, cohesion, effective influence, wealth, organization, etc., that religion is itself a part of the atheist materialist civilization, and its already existing assumptions. From such a society, with such basic and habitual assumptions as we actually have, there can only arise various kinds of atheist materialist conclusions. The way forward is therefore down to considering the metaphysical assumptions of religion as what they are, which is as assumptions, not evidence derived. And therefore religions need to stop pretending to derive our metaphysical assumptions from consensus definitions, evidence and logic, because the modern consensus of what constitutes valid evidence and logic necessarily sustains atheistic materialism. If we, you and I, continue to rely upon societal and consensus, including church society and consensus, definitions and understandings of valid metaphysics, we will be trapped by atheistic materialism. Only by using our own personal discernment to discover what it is that we really believe about the ultimate and basic nature of reality can we escape atheist materialism. Only by coming to know our own personal and deepest metaphysical convictions can we move forward to a positive, sustaining, and motivating, and fundamentally different system of understanding. And only if reality is objectively real, and if that ultimate reality is set up such that we each, as individuals, can attain to sufficient true understanding of reality, could this be possible. That is the necessary faith, the faith that it is indeed possible and achievable for each one of us who desires it and consciously chooses to do it, to gain a sufficient understanding of the fundamental nature of reality for ourselves. A big danger is that we will find whatever we seek. Bruce Charlton. There seems to be a fundamental problem in life, that while passive, assimilative compliance leads, in our society and world, to disaster and damnation, on the other hand, there is a very big problem when we consciously and conscientiously seek a specific thing. This both in physical material terms, as when people pursue a career plan, or a plan to find a lover or spouse, and also spiritually. It seems that many people, including some of the greatest spiritual exemplars, have deceived themselves and fallen into error by exerting their considerable powers by devising strategies to discover and attain some very particular thing. Many people seek specific knowledge, and seek it by long-term efforts, the long monastic training by prayer, liturgy, meditation, labor, years of ascetic striving by desert-dwelling hermits, the prolonged initiation of mystery religions, spiritual science, ritual magic, alchemy, astrology, divinations, etc. The resulting gross divergence in outcomes, results, beliefs, dogmas, rules and laws, practices and compulsions, is evidence that the process was one originating in the defective willfulness of fundamentally incapable beings. The big problem of all such spiritual effort, is that people do find what they seek, yet what they seek is something that has been decided by their conscious personality mind, and implemented by the mundane willpower. Such people think they know what they need, and they suppose that they know what is good for other people and for the world. And mostly by the transformations of themselves that happen because of their sustained and willed efforts, they find what they seek, only what they seek. Find this by various combinations of enhanced abilities, diminished intuitive discernment, of actual finding with self-deception. Ultimately life, at least for a follower of Jesus, ought to be about loving relationships with other people, other beings, with God and Jesus and others. And the creativity that arises from such loving relationships. Life is therefore, ultimately, not about changing other people for what we regard as the better, that is attempted manipulation, which is a psychopathic and selfish thing, even when justified by altruistic theories. Relationships are ultimately not about us knowing just what others most need, nor about planning other people's lives, for their own good, whether materially or spiritually. Life is ultimately not about making a better world for everybody by knowledge, skill and determination exercised over time. Because we really have no idea of what that better world actually is, and the attempt to devise and impose a better world lead to propaganda and coercion, justified by the common good, and always by the end justifies the means thinking. The fact that this stuff is inevitable, and to a significant extent, in our mortal world, is because this is not heaven, and our world is permeated with evil, and undercut by entropy. But even if inevitable to a degree, this kind of will-directed strategizing should not be our ideal, yet it is, unfortunately, presented as the ideal by most religions and spiritual systems. We cannot know what is good in any degree of specific detail, even less can we know how to act and arrange things to make good. To pretend otherwise leads to great and general harm, including, and primarily, harm to ourselves. But we do know enough of such matters to be able to live well enough to develop spiritually and attain salvation, after which, as eternal resurrected beings in heaven, we can get on with participating in the world of divine creation. But not before. We cannot have it by wanting it, because what we want, in our mortal selves and world, is not really it. We can never know completely and finally, but can love wholly and eternally. Bruce Charlton. From Exegesis by Philip K. Dick, referring to his novel The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, 1982.
This is a strange ending to the novel. The will of Schopenhauer turns back on itself and is satisfied not to know. This is the form its cessation takes, that he is content not to know, and so is she. Thus one thing is certain, the restless, striving, irrational will is defeated, it is given up. If this is how victory is defined, there has been victory. If victory is defined as knowing whether Tim Archer defeats fate through Christ and immortality, it is not victory. The final message seems to be, sublime peace, freedom from the restless striving will, is possible, but knowledge, intellectual knowing, is not. The heart can know peace but the mind cannot be satisfied. The drive to know, to possess intellectual certitude is doomed to failure.
Sureness is not factual but relational, but a matter between persons, between beings, in the here and now. What we can be sure about is not knowledge, which is why epistemology, a philosophical search for surety of factual information, is a dead end. Knowing about stuff is not the core of reality, because reality is not naturally divided into units, into facts. We can never ever be certain of facts because reality is not pre-divided into facts, not factually segmented, such divisions are imposed, arbitrary, and selective. The idea that scientific facts are the only thing we can be certain of, is therefore a dangerous delusion. What, then, is the core of reality? The fundamental and real divisions are those between individual living beings. Ultimate reality is therefore to do with living beings and the relationships between them. The heart can know peace in the context of love, albeit in this mortal world that peace can only be temporary, because of entropy/death and evil. Yet in resurrected heavenly life, that peace can be eternal. And love between living beings is a dynamic thing, because life is dynamic, which is why and how love overflows into creating. Even in heaven, even for God the Creator, we will never know finally, nor wholly and eternally, because creation is ongoing, and other beings really are other. But we shall love wholly and eternally, and it is that possibility which makes heaven possible. Was the Omni-God concept a consequence of the development of human consciousness? Bruce Charlton. It is interesting to speculate how the incoherent and mass apostasy-inducing Omni-God concept arose and came to dominate Christian, and some other, theologies and priesthoods. One God who is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent and created everything from nothing, i.e. the officially mandatory nature of God according to mainstream Christianity, is an idea literally inconceivable to simple people and children. And inconceivable to people of the past, and up to the life of Jesus, because I see nothing explicit to suggest that the authors of Old Testament, the Gospels, or epistles conceptualized God in this way. The Omni idea seems to have emerged, off the record, in the generations after the ascension of Jesus and deaths of the apostles, until we see it behind the Christology schisms and disputes, concerning the divine and or human nature of Christ, that tore apart the nascent church in its early centuries. Such disputes were, and are, inevitable when Jesus was assumed to have been incarnated into the creation of an Omni-God, since the Omni definition of God excludes the possibility of Jesus being a second creator deity, and indeed removes any possible reason or purpose for a further manifestation of deity. If God is supposed to be able to do everything, know everything, be everywhere etc., then there is no necessity for Jesus Christ to be incarnated, live, die, be resurrected, ascend to heaven etc. The Omni-God can, by definition, do everything that is doable, so Jesus is superfluous. Yet if Jesus Christ is not a truly divine creator God, then Jesus is just a teacher, prophet etc., and we either assume Jesus was a false teacher and revert to Judaism, or assume Jesus was a valid teacher as with Islam. But if Jesus is not divine, he is not unique, and there is no reason to build a religion around following him. So how and why did such a strange and destructive idea emerge? My best guess of how, is that the Omni-God was synthesized from the ancient Hebrew idea of a single dominating personal God to whom all other gods were inferior and subservient, and to whom all worship and obedience was due. This monotheism was combined with Greek philosophical ideas, and religious ideas, probably from elite and initiatory mystery religions, such as Neoplatonists and Gnostics, of a universal but impersonal abstract deity that was everything, pantheism, was the ultimate cause of everything, was perfect hence timeless etc. Much like some Hindu and Buddhist philosophical concepts of deity. But why did the Omni idea happen at all? My understanding is that this was part of the development of human consciousness, and the increasing inner sense of separation of the individual from the group. Before the Omni-God concept, human consciousness was naturally, spontaneously, and largely unconsciously very much immersed in the group consciousness, and this group consciousness included the realms of spirits and the divine. Because people experienced relationships with so many other beings, such as animals, trees, landscape, the dead, angels, demons, and gods, there was no subjective problem of creation as being incoherent. There was no need to explain how it was that the universe held together and had purpose, because this coherence was simply a matter of experience. Men knew that things cohered. This was, and still is, how young children experience reality even nowadays, and perhaps some tribal peoples as well. In other words, in ancient times there was no felt problem of incoherence that the Omni concept was needed to solve. There was no need or reason to explain why all the different aspects of reality held together and had an overall purpose. And no reason to explain why there were real values, a real and universal morality. Since such things were obvious. It was when man's consciousness began, and continued, to become ever more self-aware and separated from the group consciousness, and from awareness of the dead, spirits of many kinds, and the divine, that men sought an explicit explanation of the unity of all things. That intellectuals came up with the Omni-God explanation. This does not explain why the early Christian church seized upon the Omni-God concept and made it mandatory, despite all the problems it has caused ever since. But I think that ultimately such reasons are social rather than philosophical, to do with the church as an institution, rather than Christianity as a theoretical construct. The Omni-God concept is popular in all the major monotheisms, I think because it is interpreted to make the specific religion both universal and mandatory. It is used to insert the religion and its church into the ultimate creation and operation of absolutely everything. Omni-God removes choice from religion, and religion becomes a matter of acknowledging one truth for everything. Or else the act of rejecting that church and religion gets conceptualized as rejecting absolutely everything, and all possibility of anything. So, with Omni-God, not be a member of the church and religion is therefore conceptualized as a wholly irrational and incoherent act, an embrace of absolute nothingness. If it is broadly correct that the Omni-God emerged after Jesus and in the early centuries AD, driven from within by changes in men's consciousness, then we can also see that a genuine, living, motivating belief in Omni-God has become impossible in the modern era. Shoals of people have left the Christian church, and or had their faith reduced to the feebleness of a lifestyle choice, by the insistence of Christian theology on the Omni-God combined with the gross incoherence of the concept, which incoherence has now become spontaneously obvious even to those of low intelligence. The two obvious problems about a Christianity rooted in the Omni-God concept and a good God, are an inability to explain genuine evil and extreme and undeserved suffering and death, and also an inability to explain human agency or freedom. In replying to a basic question of who was Jesus, mystery word spells about Jesus being simultaneously holy man and holy God seem like meaningless or devious abstractions, when materialism is built into the modern perspective. In replying to what did Jesus do? Kick the pseudo explanations about Jesus being necessary to save mankind from the blame attached to an original sin leading to a fall that occurred in prehistory, make no sense, and seem grossly unjust. When man's consciousness has become so spontaneously separated from the group/spirit/divine that the choices and events of putative ancient ancestors is experienced as utterly irrelevant to me here now. If the Omni-God was not original to Christianity, but instead the contingent artifact of a particular stage in man's historical consciousness, and the rhetorical requirements of the ancient church. And since the Omni-God concept currently stands in the path of any possibility of explaining, clearly and simply, the nature of Jesus and what he did, then Christians really need to go back and re-examine and reject this Omni-God dogma. And then we need to replace the obsolete and harmful Omni-God with a conceptualization of God that makes explanatory sense to us each, here, and now, and which clearly and simply explains the necessity of Jesus Christ for those who desire salvation. Love in a Time of Monsters. Francis Berger.
The old world is dying, and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters.
The quote above comes from Antonio Gramsci, 1891–1937, a Marxist philosopher who was also a founding member and one-time leader of the Communist Party in Italy. I happened to stumble upon it today and started thinking about interregnum periods in history and people like Gramsci, who were vigorously active during such times. Gramsci's observation immediately struck me as ironic. I doubt he intended it to be self-referential, however, through a historical lens, it is difficult to ignore that Gramsci was clearly among the monsters of his time, together with the fascists whom he vehemently railed against until his untimely death in a Mussolini prison in 1937. The old world of Gramsci's day began dying, or died, take your pick, after the First World War. The struggling to be born new world emerged right after the treaties were signed. It did not take long for the monster to appear. However, there were plenty of monsters in the waning old world order, too. In particular, the psychopaths who willingly sacrificed an entire generation of young men to gain a few yards of blood-soaked mud. Nevertheless, at least the old world maintained some semblance of deference to spiritual matters. The new world monsters were a different breed. They rejected spirit, and embraced the will. Their struggles to establish a new world took destruction to a whole new level, eclipsing anything the old world managed to achieve. As I pondered the quote some more, I found myself wondering if we were living through an interregnum period of sorts. I suppose we may be, however. I tend to see our current circumstances as more of a no-man's land, devoid of any real or meaningful choice for this worldly good in the form of politics or culture. In that sense, it definitely fits Gramsci's description of a time of monsters. Although partisanism still pretends to be alive and well, I get the sense that every global politician is working for the same office, albeit with varying aims and goals. Some desire an ordered, patient form of destruction, others have been given marching orders to foment chaos at every turn. The conflicts and squabbles they display to us are merely office politics, entirely irrelevant because the office itself opposes all that is good. On the one hand, this challenges our overall attitude to temporal affairs. After all, we all want to be for something, which inevitably entails being against something else. Most people want to make things better for themselves, their families, and the world at large, at least in their minds. However, if we choose between the options currently being offered, we will only be choosing between monsters and choosing to side with one monster over another. Struggling against a specific monster or all monsters will not save us from becoming monsters ourselves, a hat tip to Nietzsche's famous and overused abyss quote. On the other hand, current circumstances should make it far easier for us to focus on spiritual and relational matters based in love at a concrete level, particularly with those close to us, including the divine, which is where our primary focus should be, regardless of whether we are in an old world order, a new world order, or something in between. At the end of the day, all else is abstraction. Any other focus lures us into the land of monsters. As I continued to ponder Gramsci's quote, I found another block of text attributed to him that connects directly to what I have expressed in the paragraph above. Very illuminating and worth reading.
How many times have I wondered if it is really possible to forge links with a mass of people when one has never had strong feelings for anyone, not even one's own parents? If it is possible to have a collectivity when one has not been deeply loved oneself by individual human creatures? Hasn't this had some effect on my life as a militant? Has it not tended to make me sterile and reduce my quality as a revolutionary by making everything a matter of pure intellect, of pure mathematical calculation?
There are no good causes in politics 2026, only effective excuses for an evil agenda. Bruce Charlton. Dear oh dear, but people are so gullible, and I include myself, when it comes to politics. Some politician, whether national or international, merely has to present his policy or action as being in a good cause, and he will not lack support. Support coming from those who persist, in the teeth of everything, in assuming that there are individuals among the actual, or aspiring, leadership class of the West and international agencies who are genuinely well motivated, who truly desire to do good things. Well, the simple truth is that there are no good things. There are no policies or actions that are intrinsically good. It always depends on the motivation behind them, on what the policies and actions are genuinely intended to accomplish. If the goodest policy imaginable is in reality motivated by intent to do some evil, then a bad outcome is what will happen for sure in real life. When we have, as we do, a leadership class who are without exception servants of demonic evil, because exceptions don't want to become, or get to become, leaders, and / or get swiftly neutralized or eliminated if, somehow, they do attain power/influence/wealth/status. When we actually have such a class in control, then all policies, both those that seem helpful, if that was the intent, as well as those more obviously harmful, will actually in real life and for sure be used to do harm, in pursuit of one or another of the strategies of evil. Note, the strategies of evil can be summarized in three ways: the most obvious one of individuals trying to gratify their short-termist personal selfishness, lust, greed, status etc., the bureaucratic imperative aiming at a global totalitarian system of omni-surveillance and micro-control, and the end-stage negative or nihilistic evil of the spiteful destruction of divine creation in all its aspects. An End Times Overview. William Wildblood. A Survival Guide to the End Times is the latest in a series of books that deal with the spiritual crisis of the present day, which, it should be obvious, is the root cause of every other problem we face. The series started with Meeting the Masters, which describes certain experiences from the earlier part of my life and explains where I am coming from when speaking about these matters. There then followed what turned out to be a trilogy of sorts with Remember the Creator, Earth is a School and By No Means Equal, which dealt with the reality of God, the reason for our lives in this world, and the soul and how that is a real, immaterial thing. God, the world and the soul are the three fundamentals of our experience, but there is a fourth thing, and that is time. In most traditional societies, time was regarded as cyclical, but the Christian West saw it as linear, with a beginning, middle, perhaps analogous to the incarnation, and end. Post-Darwinian materialistic culture took up the linear idea, and we generally see time in those terms today, though many spiritual people have gone back to the cyclical idea. But what if both are true? Time is cyclical, going through various ages as detailed in Indian and ancient Greek thought, to name two of the better known, but it also goes in a line which imparts the notion of progression. So, neither cyclical nor linear, but proceeding in a spiral form. A Survival Guide to the End Times takes up the idea of the present day as being the latter stage in a process of spiritual decay as material forces overwhelm the spiritual, and yet it still sees cause for hope, because alongside this decay even now can be found potential seeds for revival in a future age, not to mention that the withdrawal of spirit provides valuable lessons that can progress the soul if responded to in the correct way. Current civilizations will fall, but this is not defeatist talk, because we are at the end of the cycle, so that is as inevitable as the fact that old age leads to death. There is no political or any other kind of solution that can avert the natural course of outer events. The age must come to an end, and the end will likely be chaotic. But from the ashes and debris of the past can come rebirth, and the beginnings of something new. The rot and decay must be burnt away as the world crumbles and the sin and lies of the past are destroyed. There will be a wiping clean of the slate for a fresh start, which nevertheless will not completely be a case of back to square one, because many of the lessons of the previous cycle will have been absorbed by the consciousness of the human souls incarnating at that time. What this means is that the current age is drawing to a close, and that cannot be avoided. But the way we respond to this can have a determining effect on the future, providing seeds of renewal on the subtle level that can sprout when the time is right.